This is the Next Take podcast, episode 78, with Mikel, and
And Tanyka.
where we have conversation on different topics. So, we're gonna be talking about June 19th, I
Yep.
believe.
Juneteenth. Yep.
Juneteenth, my bad.
I
So,
mean, you're right.
bas yeah,
Technically.
basically June 19th, but
Yeah, but
yeah,
Juneteenth is what it's
yeah,
called. Yeah.
yeah. So, would you like to explain what Juneteenth is, uh, Tanyka, to the audience?
Yeah, we're just going to go right into it.
Mhm,
The episode. So this is just a disclaimer, is a shorter episode,
mhm,
but we're going to get all the information out there. So
mhm,
Juneteenth is a holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the United States, which is observed annually on June 19th, which again was just recently started happening since I think 2020. So which is great. In 1863, during the American Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared more than 3 million enslaved people living in the Confederate States to be free. More than 2 years would pass, however, before the news reached African Americans living in Texas. Mm, Why? You know what? You know what? I'm not gonna say anything because I'm scared of Texas.
mhm.
But that's messed up.
Yeah, it is.
It's selfish, white
Mhm,
people.
mhm,
It was not until Union soldiers arrived in Galveston, Texas on June 19th, 1865, that the state's residents finally learned that slavery had been abolished. Can you imagine being a slave, knowing that for the past 2 years of being a slave,
mhm,
you didn't need to be a slave? I would be
mhm.
pissed.
Yeah,
I'd be mad.
I would too. I would
I would
be
be
pissed.
grateful
Yeah.
because I'd be like, getting the hell out of here. But I'd be pissed. Ugh. The formerly enslaved immediately began to celebrate with prayer, feasting, song, and dance. The following year, on June 19th, the first official Juneteenth celebrations took place in Texas. The original observations included prayer, meetings, and the singing of spirituals, and celebrants wore new clothes as a way of representing their newfound freedom. Within a few years, African Americans in other states were celebrating the day as well, making it an annual tradition. Celebrations have continued across the United States into the 21st century and typically include prayer and religious services, speeches, educational events, family gatherings, and picnics, and festivals with music, food, and dancing, which which is great. But I feel like this was Juneteenth is something we did not hear about until 5 years ago. Like
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like this, they're making it seem like there's something that's been going on consistently since the late 1800s, but that's just not the case.
Yeah, no, no, it's not the case. Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
it got brought up 5 years ago. I think it was almost
During the
during,
pandemic. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And again, like here in Canada, we don't observe Juneteenth, obviously. Um, but my mom actually got Juneteenth off because she worked at a firm that is global, or at the time, anyways, was global. Um, so one of like they had offices in the States, so everybody got it. But again, even with Juneteenth happening, I didn't even know what Juneteenth was. It's like we're talking about Juneteenth, and I understood at least basically that it was had to do with slavery, but I didn't know really what it was. And I feel like that was something that was missing. Maybe it was out there if you're watching the right things or reading the right things or whatever. But for me, it's like I just didn't know anything about it. And maybe that's obviously partially on me, but I just didn't know exactly what it was about. So I feel like I can't be the only person, and maybe there are people who were not taking that seriously. Kind of like Family Day. We don't do Family Day. We don't take that seriously. So, bad example, but I'm just trying to say, like, you know what I mean? Hmm. Maybe people don't take that necessarily seriously or don't
Yeah,
understand.
yeah. Mhm.
Um, Juneteenth became a state holiday in Texas in 1980, and a number of other states subsequently followed suit. Funny that Texas was the first to do it, seeing as they were the last to do it. So,
Mhm.
okay. In 2021, Juneteenth was made a federal holiday in part because of the actions of activist Opal Lee to raise awareness, which I believe I saw, not documentary, but a special, and I saw her. She's been just just championing for Juneteenth to be more recognized, and like she's much older. Um, the day is also celebrated outside the United States, being used by organizations in a number of countries to recognize the end of slavery and to honor the culture and achievements of African Americans.
Mhm.
So just to kind of go a little bit into the Civil War, very, very quick synopsis. I think we need to have that background of this because they go hand in hand. So, the American Civil War was a 4-year war from 1861 to 1865 between the United States and 11 southern states that uh, seceded from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. The succession of the southern states in chronological order was South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina in 1860 and 61, and the ensuing outbreak of armed hostilities were the culmination of decades of growing sectional friction over slavery. Between 1815 and 1861, the economy of the northern states was rapidly modernizing and diversifying. Although agriculture, mostly smaller farms that relied on free labor, remained the dominant sector in the north, industrial industrialization and taken root there. Moreover, Northerners had invested heavily in an expansive and varied transportation system that included canals, roads, steamboats, and railroads. In financial industries such as banking and insurance, and in large communications network that featured inexpensive, widely available newspapers, magazines, and books, along with the telegraph. By contrast, the Southern economy was based principally on large farms, plantations that produced commercial crops such as cotton, and that relied on slaves as the main labor force. Rather than invest in factories or railroads as Northerners had done, Southerners invested their money in slaves, even more than in land. Like, I can't wrap my mind around that. But yeah, by 1860, 84% of the capital invested in manufacturing was invested in the free, non-slave holding states. Yet to Southerners as late as 1860, this appeared to be a sound business decision. The price of cotton, the South's defining crop, had skyrocketed in the 1850s, and the value of slaves, who were, after all, property, okay, rose commensurately. I think that's the word. Um, by 1860, the per capita wealth of Southern whites was twice that of Northerners, and three-fifths of the wealthiest individuals in the country were Southerners. The extension of slavery into new territories and states had been an issue as far back as the Northwest Ordinance of 1784. When the slave territory of Missouri sought statehood in 1818, Congress debated for 2 years before arriving upon the Missouri Compromise of 1820. This was the first of a series of political deals that resulted from arguments between pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces over the expansion of the peculiar institution, as it was known, into the West. The end of the Mexican-American War in 1848 and the roughly 500,000 square miles of new territory that the United States gained as a result of it added a new sense of urgency to the dispute. More and more Northerners, driven by a sense of morality or an interest in protecting free labor, came to believe in the 1850s that bondage needed to be eradicated. White Southerners feared limiting the expansion of slavery would consign the institution to certain death. Right. Over the course of the decade, the two sides became increasingly polarized, and politicians less able to contain the dispute through compromise. When Abraham Lincoln, the candidate of the explicitly anti-slavery Republican Party, the Republican Party, won the 1860 presidential election, seven southern states, South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas carried out their threat and the succeeded organization as the Confederate States of America.
Mm.
In the early morning hours of April 12th, 1861, rebels opened fire on Fort Sumter at the entrance to the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. Curiously, this first encounter of what would be the bloodiest war in the history of the United States claimed no victims. After a 34-hour bombardment, Major Robert Anderson surrendered his command of about 85 soldiers to some 5,500 besieging Confederate troops under PGT Beauregard. Within weeks, four more southern states, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, left the Union to join the Confederacy. With war upon the land, President Lincoln called for 75,000 militiamen to serve for 3 months. He proclaimed a naval blockade of the Confederate States, although he insisted that they did not legally constitute a sovereign country, but were instead states in rebellion. He also directed the Secretary of the Treasury to advance $2 million to assist. That's a lot of money back then.
Yep.
A lot of money.
Yep.
Like, that's like a billion. I don't know. To assist in the raising of troops, and he suspended the writ of habeas corpus first along the East Coast and ultimately throughout the country. The Confederate government had previously authorized a call for 100,000 soldiers for at least 6 months' service, and this figure was soon increased to 400,000. To the astonishment of many, Lincoln grew in stature with time and experience, and by 1864 he had become a consummate politician and war director. Lincoln matured into a remarkably effective president because of his great intelligence, communication skills, mm, humility, sense of purpose, sense of humor, fundamentally moderate nature, and ability to remain focused on the big picture. But he had much to learn at first, especially in strategic and tactical matters and in his choices of army commanders. With an ineffective first Secretary of War, Simon Cameron, Lincoln unhesitantly insinuated himself directly into the planning of military movements. Edwin M. Stanton, a well-known lawyer appointed to the secretaryship on January 20th, 1862, was equally untutored in military affairs, but he was fully as active a participant as his superior. So, I mean, that's basically just like a quick little synopsis of the Civil War and
Mhm.
kind of like where this all kind of came from. Of course, we kind of know it, lasted for 4 years. It, you know, ended with It's the reason why Lincoln was also assassinated. So with him doing the emancipation, but you know, yeah. So just a quick thing, but that's Juneteenth and the Civil War.
Mm.
That's it for me.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay. All right. So this ends this episode 78 of the Next Tape podcast. The Next Tape podcast is available now on all podcast platforms. We also have a website called Tanyka.
Next take podcast.podpage.io.
All right. And where else are we at, Tanika?
Facebook and Instagram at Next Take Podcast, and Twitter and TikTok at Next Take Pod.
And you can contact us on our email at mikeltanika@gmail.com. That is mikeltanika@gmail.com. So Tanika briefly talked about
Juneteenth.
Juneteenth. And yeah, if you wanted to look for more information about Juneteenth, you can search on Google. There's a lot of articles based on that. And also, there's a lot of I would say basically books on uh Juneteenth as well. So if you guys want to do your research, go check all of those resources out. And yeah, pretty much that's it. Anything you want to say, Tanika? Or
I
okay.
think we'll just say that this was the last episode for Black History Month,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going into Women's History Month. So
Yeah.
that's what we're going into next. But yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
All right. Cool. So I'm Mikel, and
And I'm Tanyka.
we're out until
Next week.
next week. All
No,
right.
actually, no, wait. I think tomorrow, actually.
My bad. Tomorrow.
I
Okay.
think, yeah, tomorrow
All
with the Netflix
right.
episode.
Okay. All right. So happy Black History Month, everybody. And thank you for joining us on these episodes. Appreciate it. Bye. Peace.
Bye.